Get out of my house. Now." The words cut through the evening air like a blade. Mrs. Adana's hand trembled as she pointed toward the front door, her eyes sharp and unyielding. The marble floor reflected the glint of the chandelier above, but all Amara saw was the anger on her employer's face. She froze. Her heart hammered against her chest, louder than the ticking clock on the wall. Just a few minutes ago, she had been clearing the dinner table. Now she stood accused, judged, and condemned without a chance to speak. "Madam, please, I swear," Amara's voice cracked, but she couldn't finish. "Not another word," Mrs. Adana snapped. "You dare to seduce my husband under my own roof after everything I've done for you. Take your shame and leave this instant." The guards didn't wait for further instructions. Heavy footsteps echoed across the polished tiles as two men approached. One grabbed Amara's worn bag from the corner, tossing it to the floor beside her. The other moved closer, his expression unreadable. Amara's knees buckled. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, to tell the truth. But her throat closed. The room blurred with tears she refused to shed in front of them. Her employer's words replayed again and again, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. Behind Mrs. Adana stood her husband, Mr. Obina, calm and collected, sipping from a glass of juice as though none of this mattered. His eyes flickered briefly toward Amara, not with guilt, but with the satisfaction of a man who knew he had won. Amara's breath caught in her chest. She knew then this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a trap. The guards moved in. Cold hands grabbed her arms, steering her toward the door. Her sandals slapped against the floor, each step heavier than the last. She twisted her head back desperately. "Please, madame, my mother is sick. I have nowhere to go. I've given 10 months of my life to this house. Please believe me, he's lying." But Mrs. Adana didn't even look at her. She turned away, her heels clicking against the tiles, the sound sharp and final. The front door opened and the night air rushed in. The guards shoved Amara outside. Her bag landed with a dull thud on the pavement. Then slam. The iron gate closed behind her with a clang so loud it echoed in her bones. Silence followed. Amara stood barefoot under the dim glow of the streetlight. The wind carried the faint smell of rain and dust. Her hands trembled as she bent to pick up her bag. 10 months of quiet mornings, endless chores, and silent sacrifices reduced to nothing in a matter of minutes. She hugged the bag close to her chest. Tears pricked her eyes, but she bit her lip hard. The world could take away her job, her home, even her dignity in this moment, but she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Yet inside she was crumbling. Where would she go? The city felt vast and merciless. Her phone buzzed faintly in her pocket. The screen lit up with her mother's name. A weak voice note she had received earlier played in her memory. Her mother asking if she was safe, if she had eaten, if she could send more medicine money. Amara's chest tightened. She couldn't answer. Not like this. A motorbike roared past its headlights, blinding for a second. The rider didn't even slow down. To him, she was just another girl on the roadside with a bag, invisible, unimportant. Amara took one shaky step forward, then another. The night seemed endless, the road stretching ahead into shadows she didn't recognize. Each breath felt heavy, each heartbeat louder, as though the city itself wanted to swallow her whole. But somewhere in that darkness, something waited. Because this was not the end of Amara's story. It was only the beginning. And to truly understand how she had reached this breaking point, we must look back into the very house where she once lived, into the silent battles she endured every day, and the unspoken power games that had slowly cornered her until tonight. The morning sun always crept into the Adana residence like liquid gold spilling across cream-colored walls and marble floors polished so clean they reflected every shadow. It was a house that whispered of wealth and power. But for Amara, it was also a place of silence, a silence heavy with secrets. She had been there for nearly 10 months. Each day began before the birds outside stirred. She would rise quietly, knot her wrapper around her waist, and start the routine no one else seemed to notice, sweeping the corridors, ironing school uniforms, scrubbing the children's shoes until they gleamed. She prepared breakfast for little Ifioma, and her brother Chidi washed the laundry, fetched groceries, and ensured the water tank never ran dry. Mrs. Adana rarely saw these efforts. A respected banker, she left home before dawn most days, her sharp heels clicking on the marble like a ticking clock counting down Amara's borrowed time. She returned late, often carrying the scent of expensive perfume and the weight of endless meetings. Her interactions with Amara were brief, clipped a grocery list, handed over a reprimand if the stew wasn't warm enough. But Mr. Obinna was always there. He claimed to run an online business from his study upstairs, though Amara noticed he spent far more time lounging with his laptop half open than working. At first, she tried to ignore the way his eyes lingered. She told herself maybe he admired her diligence, the way she kept the house spotless. But those glances soon hardened into something sharper, something that made her skin prickle. Amara. The air freshener is finished. Amara, my charger isn't working. Excuses that pulled her into his presence. And then came the comment she could never forget. You bend like a river, Amara. Smooth, flowing. His voice had been low, hungry. She froze, clutching the sponge in her hand, the air sucked out of her lungs. From that moment, she made sure never to be caught alone with him again. But evasion was impossible in a house where every corner echoed his footsteps. What made it worse was his performance when his wife was around. In front of her, he transformed into a cold critic. Amara, don't you know how to sweep properly? Amara, your food is tasteless again. The whiplash left her shaken. To Mrs. Adana, it painted a picture of a maid who was both incompetent and invisible, tolerated only because of necessity. And yet the children noticed. Why do you look sad all the time? Ifioma once asked as Amara braided her hair. Amara forced a smile. I'm just tired, my dear. But it wasn't tiredness. It was fear. Fear that tightened her chest whenever Mr. Tson, Obinna's shadow, crossed the doorway. Fear that silenced her tongue whenever Mrs. Adana spoke of her husband's loyalty with unwavering trust. Late at night in her small room behind the house, Amara would lie awake listening to the ceiling fan hum above her. Her thoughts circled like restless birds. Should I tell her? Would she even believe me? Her mind always returned to her mother, sick in their village home, relying on Amara's small salary to afford medicine. If she lost this job, it wouldn't just be her life unraveling. So she swallowed her tears. Each day she tied her scarf tighter, lifted her chin higher, and carried her silence like armor. But silence is a fragile shield. Every whispered word from Mr. Obinna chipped at it. Every cruel glance tested its strength, and every moment she kept quiet, the weight grew heavier, pressing down on her spirit. Until one morning when the weight became unbearable. The kettle whistled in the kitchen as Amara prepared breakfast. Her hands moved with practiced ease, frying eggs, buttering bread, pouring tea, yet her chest felt heavier with every step. Each corner of the house carried a memory she wished she could scrub away. The staircase where Mr. Obinna had whispered something vile. The children's playroom where he had brushed past her back and pretended it was an accident. That morning, his stare followed her more intensely than ever. He stood by the living room window, arms crossed, eyes sharp as glass. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence made her skin tighten, as though she no longer belonged in her own body. Good morning, sir, she murmured, her voice barely audible. No reply. Just the steady, unblinking gaze. Amara turned quickly back to the kitchen, her heart pounding like a drum. The walls of the house felt closer now, pressing in on her. Even washing dishes, a task that once soothed her, had become a punishment. That afternoon, her dread deepened. Amara, come to the study, Mr. Obinna's voice rang from upstairs. Her feet froze. Every muscle in her body resisted, but she could not refuse. She climbed the staircase slowly, her palms damp, her breath shallow. The study door was ajar. He sat behind the desk, typing lazily on his laptop. Something spilled in the bottom drawer, he said without looking up. Amara knelt down, opened the drawer. It was empty. I don't see anything, sir, she said carefully. When she turned, he was standing close, too close. His eyes fixed on her blouse, his breath shallow, heavy. Fear surged through her. She rose swiftly. Sir, please. Respect yourself. A smile slid across his face. Amara, I like bold women. Don't pretend you don't see how I look at you. You're not like other maids. Her hands trembled, but her voice steadied. If you don't stop this, I'll tell your wife. The smile vanished. His eyes darkened. Tell her that her husband chased after you. Do you think she'll believe you? No, Amara. She will believe me. And when I'm done, you'll leave this house in shame. The words chilled her blood. She fled the study, her legs shaking beneath her, tears stinging her eyes. That night, she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the cracked wall, wondering if silence was slowly destroying her, or if speaking out would destroy her faster. The next morning, she barely had time to breathe before everything collapsed. Mrs. Adana was unusually home, seated on the couch with her phone in hand. Amara entered with a tray of breakfast, her pulse racing. Maybe this is my chance. Maybe today I can tell her the truth. But before she could open her mouth, Mr. Obinna entered. His face wore a mask of false sincerity. He placed his cup on the table, sighing heavily. Adana, there's something I must tell you. It's about Amara. I didn't want to embarrass her, but she has been trying to seduce me. Amara gasped, nearly dropping the tray. That's not true. Keep quiet, Mrs. Adana's voice cracked like a whip. How dare you interrupt? Amara's chest constricted. Madam, he is lying. He's the one who... Oh, please. Mrs. Adana cut her off with a bitter laugh. My husband may be lazy, but he is loyal. He would never stoop so low. You wait until he speaks, and only then try to defend yourself. Shameful. Tears blurred Amara's vision. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. You're right about that, Mrs. Adana said coldly. She turned to the guards. Take this girl out of my house. Let her carry her shame with her. Madame, please, my mother is ill. I have nowhere to go. Please, I beg you. But her pleas dissolved into the walls. The guards seized her arms, dragging her toward the gate. Behind her, Mr. Obinna stood silent, victorious, his smirk a dagger in her memory. The iron gates slammed shut, and the life she had worked so hard to build crumbled in seconds. The gate clanged shut behind her, the echo vibrating through her bones. Amara stumbled forward, her bag clutched to her chest. The streetlight flickered overhead, casting long, trembling shadows across the quiet road. 10 months of labor swallowed by a single lie. 10 months of sacrifice erased in one breath. She wandered aimlessly through the dark estate, her sandals scraping against the pavement. A few neighbors glanced at her as she passed, but quickly looked away. To them, she was just another disgraced maid, a stain on someone's household. No one asked questions. No one offered help. By the time she reached the main road, Lagos was stirring awake. Cars honked, buses screeched, traders shouted their goods into the thick morning air. But Amara felt invisible. The crowd flowed around her as if she didn't exist. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the night before. Her legs wobbled beneath her, her vision blurred. She stepped into the service lane without looking. A sharp screech tore through the air. Tires screamed against asphalt. A black SUV swerved violently, missing her by inches. The driver slammed the door and jumped out. Are you out of your mind? Do you want to die? The man's voice was loud, commanding, but when his eyes fell on her, the anger drained. He saw the dusty wrapper, the trembling hands gripping a worn travel bag, the tear-stained face of a woman on the edge. Amara's knees weakened. She couldn't speak. The man's tone softened. Are you okay? Her lips parted. Her voice cracked. No. I'm not okay. He paused, studying her. Tall, well-groomed, dressed in crisp clothes that didn't belong in this dusty part of town, he looked every bit like someone who should have been far away from her world. Yet here he was. Come, he said gently. There's a small cafe nearby. You need water at least. Amara hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to trust. Men had only brought her pain, humiliation. And yet, something in his voice felt different. No pressure, no hidden threat, only quiet patience. Her legs gave her no choice. She nodded faintly. At the cafe, the waiter's eyes narrowed at Amara's ragged appearance, but one look at the man's wristwatch and confident demeanor silenced any protest. He ordered bottled water and tea. Amara's hands shook as she drank the cool liquid burning down her throat, but reviving her all the same. He sat across from her silent, letting her breathe. Only when her shoulders eased did he speak again. My name is Kelechi. What's yours, Amara? She whispered. Amara, he repeated softly, as though tasting the sound. It means grace, doesn't it? But you don't look like someone living in grace today. Her lips curved into a bitter smile. Because I have none left. And then, as if a dam inside her broke, the words poured out. She told him everything, the harassment, the betrayal, the humiliation of being dragged out like a thief. She spoke of her sick mother waiting for medicine, of the shame she carried, of the long night on the roadside. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. Kelechi didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He simply listened. When her story ended, Amara lowered her gaze, ashamed of her own desperation. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said all this. I don't even know you. Kelechi leaned forward, his voice calm. Don't apologize. You've carried too much alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone else hear your pain. Her eyes lifted to his, confused. But why would you care? You don't even know me. For a moment, silence. Then he slid his wallet from his pocket and placed a card on the table. The crest engraved on it gleamed under the cafe light. Her eyes widened as she read. Kelechi Okafor, Director Zenith Holdings, son of the President of Nigeria. Amara blinked, stunned. She looked up at him, her lips parting, but no words coming. He smiled gently. I don't want anything from you. Not your fear, not your trust, not yet. All I ask is to let me take you somewhere safe, a place to rest, to eat, to breathe again. After that, the choice is yours. Amara's heart raced. She didn't know if she could trust him. But for the first time since the gates slammed behind her, she felt something she thought she had lost completely: hope. The ride to Kelechi's home felt like a dream. Amara sat quietly in the back seat of the SUV, her fingers twisting the strap of her worn bag. The clean leather interior smelled of citrus, a sharp contrast to the dust of the streets clinging to her skin. She dared not ask questions. Her heart still raced, torn between fear and the fragile thread of hope this stranger had given her. When the gates of his residence opened, she gasped. The compound was vast, the lawns neatly trimmed, fountains glittering under the sun. A middle-aged woman in a crisp apron greeted them at the door. This is Auntie Neka, Kelechi said softly. She'll take care of you. For the first time in days, Amara slept in a clean bed. She bathed, ate, and cried silently under warm water that seemed to wash away the dirt of betrayal. By morning, her body felt lighter, though her spirit still trembled. 2 days later, Kelechi invited her to his study. A black folder lay on the desk. Inside were documents bearing her name, business registration papers, a lease agreement for a small shop. Even a bank account opened in her name. Amara's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. I don't understand. You once told me you loved cooking, Kelechi said. That it was your dream to open a food business. Dreams don't have to die because people mistreat you. This is a start. Tears filled her eyes. She couldn't speak. But Kelechi wasn't finished. There's more you need to know. Mr. Obina's lies can't go unanswered. Too many women like you suffer in silence because no one believes them. That ends now. Amara froze. What do you mean, he said, leaning forward. We're going to expose him. A week later, the grand ballroom of a Lagos hotel buzzed with anticipation. Zenith Holdings was unveiling its new community initiative, a fund to support small businesses run by women. Media outlets crowded the hall cameras, flashing reporters scribbling notes. At the center of it all stood Kelechi, poised and confident, his voice carrying across the room. But Amara was there too, seated in the front row, her heart pounding in her ears. She had wanted to back out a dozen times. Each time Kelechi's steady words anchored her. The truth deserves light. You deserve light. As the ceremony neared its end, Kelechi's tone shifted. Before we close, I want to share a story. It is not mine, but it belongs to someone whose courage deserves this room's attention. He gestured toward Amara. All eyes turned. Her breath caught, but she stood. Her legs trembled, yet something inside her steadied. With a microphone in hand, she began. Her voice was soft at first, but it grew stronger with each word. She told them about the months of quiet work, the unspoken harassment, the false accusation that destroyed her name. She told them how she was cast out, like refuse abandoned, when she needed help most. Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters leaned forward, pens racing. And then proof. Kelechi projected messages onto the screen. Texts Obina had sent Amara intercepted by a guard who had grown uncomfortable with his boss's behavior. The words dripped with suggestion, with threats undeniable to anyone who read them. A murmur swept the room. The guard himself stepped forward, his voice steady. He testified that Obina had harassed Amara, that he had seen it with his own eyes. The ballroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. In that moment, the carefully constructed image of Mr. Obina collapsed. His smug silence turned to panic as journalists swarmed him, their microphones stabbing the air. Mrs. Adana, pale as marble, sat, frozen disbelief etched on her face. The weight of truth crushed the lies she had so readily believed. Amara's hands trembled as she lowered the microphone. For the first time, she saw justice not as a dream, but as something alive pulsing through the room with every flash of a camera, every gasp of the crowd. Kelechi stepped beside her, his presence steady. He didn't need to say anything. The truth had spoken loud enough. By the time the event ended, the story had already spread across the city. Headlines blazed on social media: banker's husband, exposed for harassment. Young Maid vindicated. Public opinion turned swiftly, condemning Obina's cruelty, questioning Mrs. Adana's blind trust. And Amara, she walked out of that ballroom taller, her steps lighter. For once, she wasn't invisible. For once, she was seen. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Newspapers carried her name. Online blogs replayed her speech at the ballroom again and again. Some called her the maid who refused to break, others hailed her as the face of courage. For Amara, it was overwhelming. She had never imagined her private pain becoming public truth, but now the city seemed to know her story. Meanwhile, Mr. Obina's world unraveled. The bank where his wife worked distanced itself from him. Investors pulled away from his supposed business, and whispers of disgrace spread through every circle he once boasted to belong to. He was no longer the smug man sipping juice behind polished doors. He had become a cautionary tale. Mrs. Adana, shaken by the revelation, withdrew from public view. Some said she resigned from her prestigious post, unable to bear the scrutiny. Amara did not gloat at her downfall. Pity lingered in her heart for a woman who had chosen loyalty to a lie over compassion for the truth. But Amara herself was stepping into a different world. Under Kelechi's guidance, the little dream she once whispered about became reality. The documents he had shown her were more than paper. They were a doorway. Within weeks, renovations began on a modest shop space in Surulere. The sign above the door read, Amara's Kitchen. Homemade goodness, heart-made dreams. She stood outside on opening day, the sun warm on her face, the silver pendant around her neck catching the light. Inside, two young women wiped down tables nervously, their laughter shy but genuine. They were girls like her maids, who had been unfairly dismissed women, who had carried shame that wasn't theirs to bear. Amara had chosen them as her first employees. Here you're safe, she told them. Here we build again. The shop quickly drew attention. Customers came for the rich pepper stew and fried plantain, but they stayed for the warmth, the sense that every plate carried more than food. It carried resilience. Amara's Kitchen became more than a business. It became a haven. Sometimes she caught her reflection in the glass door, no longer the broken girl standing outside an iron gate, but a woman who had found her voice. Each day, the pendant reminded her of that moment when the world first saw her truth. As weeks turned into months, she heard less of Mr. Obinna. He had vanished from the spotlight he once craved. Yet his absence mattered little. What mattered were the lives stepping through her doorway, the girls who now braided each other's hair in the kitchen, laughing as they stirred pots of stew, building futures together. At night, in her modest new apartment above the shop, Amara would sit by the window watching Lagos lights flicker in the distance. The city no longer felt merciless. It felt alive, a place where pain could be turned into possibility. She thought of her mother, healthier now with proper medicine, her voice brighter whenever they spoke on the phone. Amara whispered softly to herself, this is only the beginning. The morning sun filtered through the glass windows of Amara's kitchen, painting the walls in soft gold. The scent of fried plantain and fresh bread filled the air, mingling with the sound of young women laughing in the kitchen. For Amara, this was no longer just a shop. It was proof that broken pieces could be reshaped into something whole, something beautiful. Around her neck rested the silver dove pendant Kelechi had given her. She often touched it unconsciously, her fingers brushing its smooth edges. To her, it was more than jewelry, it was a reminder. A symbol of freedom, of dignity, reclaimed, of hope, reborn when she had thought all was lost. That afternoon, as she arranged flowers on the counter, she noticed a young girl lingering by the doorway. Barefoot, carrying a tray of oranges, her eyes downcast, shoulders hunched, as if carrying the weight of the world. Amara saw herself in that girl, the same fear, the same invisibility. She stepped forward, gently. Sister, are you hungry? The girl's eyes widened. Yes, Ma. Come inside, Amara said softly, opening the door wider. You're safe here. The girl hesitated, then stepped into the warm glow of the shop. The pendant at Amara's chest caught the light, glinting like a quiet promise. In that moment, Amara realized her story was never only about her. It was about every girl who had been silenced, every woman who had been doubted, every voice pushed into shadows. She had been given wings, and now she would help others fly. Outside, Lagos bustled as always, cars honking, traders calling, life rushing forward. But inside Amara's kitchen, something timeless stirred. Not just food, but hope. Not just work, but second chances. She pressed her hand against the pendant, her lips curving into a smile. She whispered words she once thought she'd never believe again, there is still grace. And with that, the story of a maid who was thrown out with shame ended not in bitterness, but in renewal. Because sometimes the most powerful kind of love is the one that expects nothing in return, the kind that gives you wings, stands back, and watches you soar. In life, we often learn that dignity and truth are far stronger than power or status. Amara's story reminds us that injustice may silence us for a season, but silence is never the end. When we choose courage over fear and integrity over compromise, the truth eventually finds its way into the light. Like the saying goes, the darkest hour is just before the dawn. No matter how heavy the burden, hope and compassion can turn brokenness into renewal, not only for ourselves, but for others who walk the same road. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment when you had to stand for your dignity even when no one believed you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this message touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire reflection and strength. May peace and hope find you even after life's hardest storms.